Right, great. Welcome, folks. Future of Work Scotland. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, very warm welcome to you. If you've been with us before, welcome back. I'm your host for this session, Sathpal Singh. Everybody calls me Sath. I'm joined by my co-hosts this evening, Donald Henderson and Nicola Bennett. Just the usual formalities. We do have a code of conduct. Ensure that we ask that you be respectful to one another. We want everyone to have a great experience. We will facilitate questions from our speaker, through the chat. So do please put them in the chat window. And as we go, if you prefix them with a Q, that helps organisers and co-organisers and I spot them and relay them back to the speaker. And we'll do some community shout outs at the end. Great, I'm delighted this evening to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Charlie Cartwright, all the way from the US. In Kansas. Dr. Charlie is the founder of People Success Labs. He's also the creator of the People Success Formula, and he's been spending the last 3 decades studying people and trying to help people unlock their potential. So I'm pretty excited to learn more about his work and hear about the People Success Formula. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Charlie to take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm just really looking forward to this experience and sharing with everyone today. So thank you for making time all the way from the US. So I prepared a slide deck, and of course we'll have time for Q&A at the end, but also, Sath, if you receive some great questions, keep an eye on those, and you want to interject, don't hesitate. It won't throw me at all to pull in, and I'll pull back out. So I'm going to go ahead and share my deck, and we will get started. All right, so again, my name is Dr. Charlie Cartwright, and this is my contact information. And I'm gonna pull out because I want to use the viewers, the presenters. I want to use the presenters view. All right.
Charlie, I think you're on mute. Somehow I think you popped on mute. You might not want to start that bit again. Thank you.
Excellent. So, we're talking about the future of work, and it's been such a volatile time with the pandemic and everything that's went on. And there's a quote that I really love to refer to often in these times, and it's from Aristotle Onassis. And he said, "We must give up the hope that the sea will ever rest. We must learn to sail in high wind." And it's so true when we're looking at all the things that we've been through, and we're looking at from a professional standpoint, even a personal standpoint. What can I do? It's such a big issue that we've been posed with globally, and it's affected our personal life as well as our professional life. And it reminds me of something that JFK said many years ago, and he said this. He said, "Anyone can make a difference, and everyone should try." And I really love that quote. So keep that in mind as we go through the deck today, because the research that I'm going to share with you is a way for you to make a difference. And everything that we talk about today, it applies on the professional space, but all these concepts will also apply in the personal space. So they'll really help you as you navigate your life, both personally and professionally, which is awesome because it's all aspects. But here's the thing you have to always remember when you get exposed to new information and new learning is the learning process is a lot like the growth process of the Chinese bamboo tree. And a lot of people don't know about the Chinese bamboo tree and how it really runs. And so there's so many parallels to life that I always love every opportunity I have to share that with folks. And if we all went out to right now, we met at a tropical island and we planted ourselves a Chinese bamboo tree. And we went away and made a pact that we were going to come back on an annual basis. And we came back in a year and we looked at our bamboo tree. It would look a lot like this. Not much growth had occurred. But then we come back and check on our bamboo tree in year 2, it would look the same. We wait another year and come back, still no apparent growth. Even the 4th year when we made the journey to check on our tree, our sapling, we'd find that not much growth. But then that 5th year when we returned, we start to see growth, and that tree will grow 80 feet in 6 weeks. Well, what was happening during those previous 5 years? This root system was being established so that it could support the stature of that tree. So evenings like this is an opportunity for you to really establish your root system so that it can support the stature of your career and your personal life as well. So here's a question that I often get, and it's about culture. And anytime we're talking about the future of work, we're going to be talking about culture and company culture. And what is that? And I believe that culture is the heartbeat of any organization, right? And so we look at the heart. If we have a strong heartbeat, we have a strong body. But if we have a weak heartbeat at any time, then our body is going to be weak. So it is with the workspace. And there's so many meetings and strategies, and we have goals, vision, strategy, so many things that happen, but we have to understand the important role of culture. And the fact of the matter is, whether we're talking about vision, goals, strategy, culture eats all that for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So if we don't get the culture right within our organizations, then all of the things that we work on, they're either going to be ineffective or not nearly as effective as they potentially could be if we got the culture part of the equation correct. So how do we do that? And I was fascinated by this question because I know that success leaves clues, right? And so if we can track down those clues to success through research, then we can really find the keys to the kingdom. And I remember thinking about Edward Deming, who's credited with being the father of total quality management many, many years ago. He said that in God we trust, all others must bring data. And if you don't have data, you're just another person with an opinion. So I just got fascinated with all the data that's out there and available about how to create culture, how to positively influence human behavior. And I really been consumed with it for over 3 decades, as was mentioned earlier. And it's fascinating because anytime there's a dispute, then I think that data wins the day, doesn't it? And so I began my research and I looked at all industries, not simply healthcare, not simply communications, not simply military, university, manufacturing, aviation. I looked at all of these industries and they all had research about how to create culture, how to positively influence human behavior. They had research about leadership. But all these industries, what I found was they weren't talking to one another about their research. So then I said, hey, it'd be a great idea if I put all that research together in a massive meta-analysis to see what the path that would be painted would look like. And when I did that, the path became very clear. And that is what created the People Success Formula and then the People Success Pyramid, which I'm going to share with you today. So it's so interesting that I'm a self-confessed research nerd. love research. And so if there's ever a time when I just can't get to sleep, tossing and turning, I'll finally get up and get out of bed, and I don't watch late night television. What I will do though is fire up my laptop and pull up this screen. And so this was one of those particular evenings. I pulled up the Google search homepage, and I was just thinking, what do I want to learn today? What's on my mind this evening as I'm awake? And it occurred to me that, you know what, I had never been to Google's corporate homepage, their actual corporate site, their webpage. So I Googled Google and found their corporate site, and went into it and was really interested in what they had to say. But out of all of that evening, when I was on Google's site, there was an icon right on their homepage, and it said 10 things we know to be true at Google. And so I clicked on it, and it was a great list. I learned several things, but it was one of these situations where they saved the best for last. And that was number 10. And I'd never seen it anywhere. And I remember I was just blown away by this statement. And what they said was, great's just not good enough. It's a starting point. You know, in my lifetime, no one has ever walked up to me and said, hey, Charlie, Dr. Charlie, you know what? Great's just not good enough. It's a starting point. No one's ever said that to me. So then I was curious, hey, why would Google say that? And it didn't take but a few seconds to figure it out. You know what? The reason why they would make that statement is because they're the best in the world at what they do. And so I really applied it to so many things since then. And thinking about it, that is really what world-class looks like. When you're the best at what you do, it's world-class. So when we think about our business, our organizations, to achieve world-class results, we have to have a world-class culture. And, you know, we had the pandemic. And so last year, the Olympics were postponed, and they creatively moved them to 2021. So I'm really looking forward to those Olympic Games. And when I watch them, I am fascinated by the swimming, mainly because I swim like a rock. So I am just fascinated that people can glide across the water the way they do. But here's the reality. There's a lot of great swimmers, not just in the US, but all over the world. And during the Olympic Games, they're going to be doing the same thing that we're all going to be doing. And that's watching it on television, because you know what? You have to be world class to make the Olympic field. And so I think in this global economy, in this global environment, you want to future-proof your career or your organization. The only way to do that is to become world class. And what does that look like? What does it really take? And that's what we're gonna dive in today. We're really gonna answer that question, because here's something that's happened to everyone, personally or professionally. You've got a message you want to deliver, and you work on it, you practice it, and you deliver it, and boom, bullseye. You're like, this is awesome. This is great. This is easy. And then the next person that you come into contact with and you share that message, what happens? This. And the next time, and the next time. And now you're thinking, well, I thought this was easy, because first time out of the box, I thought I had it right. But I said the exact same thing to 4 different people, and only one of them responded positively. So why is that? Why does that happen? And there's just a realization that we've all got to come to. And it's something that the individual that had the vision for Starbucks, he was really fascinated by the product, and Howard Schultz had the vision to turn Starbucks into 6 stores in Seattle, Washington, to over 30,000 stores, to be this global icon that it is today. And he said, I really realized early on that we weren't in the coffee business serving people, that we're in the people business serving coffee. And so regardless of industry, we have to realize that we're all in the people business. And so if we're all in the people business, then it makes sense that we would want to understand everything we could about other human beings. And if we do that, then we're going to navigate both personally and professionally more clearly, more crisply, and more successfully. So how do we do that? What's the secret? And it's really interesting when I dove into the research is people really want to focus here. We're all been trained that, hey, you know what? I'm going to focus between this person's ears and I need to get my information into their brain. But what does that really mean? And when I dove into it, the key is not getting the information in their brain. The key is to get the information into their mind. And I've got this quote: if you understand how the mind works, you can reach anyone. And so this is what really fascinated and excited me, that I found that, human beings now, they consider us a super organism. We're made of over 37 trillion cells, but it's fascinating that we have obviously the cranial brain that everyone's familiar with, left brain, right brain. And so I remember when I was in my sales career at UPS years ago, and we studied the Herman brain dominance theory in the region that I was in. And we really looked at left brain, right brain, and even broke the cranial brain into quadrants. But now with technology, we realize that there's another brain exists within the human body. That's the heart brain, right? 86 billion neurons in the cranial brain, but wow, they found 40,000 neurons in an independent central nervous system occupies the heart. So it's more than just a pump. And so we've got two brains, and then as the story goes, we have a third, the gut brain. So that gut feeling that we've all heard, observed, and talked about, it's real. And you know what? 500 million neurons occupy the gut brain. So if we really want to get into the minds of the people we work with, whether it's client, prospect, or coworkers, we need to understand that 3 brains make up 1 mind. So when we align these 3, then we're going to influence the mind of any individual in the world. So how do we go about that? So the people success formula is how we go about it. And I'm going to break it down today. There are 10 principles, and 6 of those principles have exponents. And when we operate this formula effectively, then the results are going to be positive in our favor. So when it comes to work, people love working with and doing business with people that they know, people that they like, people that they trust. And once people know us, like us, and trust us, then there's an opportunity for us to add value, but not before we've accomplished that. We've got to be able to accomplish those things. And utilizing the people success formula, it really sets us up for success with human beings. So people getting to know us. How do we do it? And this is something that is a stumbling block sometimes for individuals, and especially on the professional side, because most of us have to overcome that summer sales school that we all went to growing up. And when I asked this question, you remember the sales school that you went to growing up, people have this look on their face. They're kind of befuddled, like, I didn't attend any summer school that talked about sales and business. And you actually did. And when you went to that school, you were taught some lessons. Well, what were the lessons that you were taught at that school? Well, there were 3 lessons. And these 3 lessons, unfortunately, are things that we have to overcome as adults to achieve our full potential. And the first lesson you were taught is don't talk to strangers, right? Don't talk to strangers. Second lesson was don't bother people. And the third lesson was don't ask for money. And in business, we need to talk to strangers. We need to be able to bother people. And at the end of the day, we need to be able to ask for money. So when we can navigate those 3, then it opens things up, and the people success formula really helps with us. So let's break down this 3-brain model. Talked about just a couple of minutes ago that this cranial brain has made up of 86 billion neurons, but you notice there's a left brain and a right brain. And so when we want to fully communicate with someone's cranial brain, we have to address both sides of the brain, not just one. So the left brain, that's where the analytics are, the numbers, no capacity for language or emotion here. So how do we best communicate with someone that's left brain dominant? Well, it's got to make sense. We got to speak in a language that they can understand. Got to make sense. We got to use numbers, data. Doesn't need to be fancy, but it needs to make sense. In other words, we've got to have our ducks in a row. And people that are left brain dominant will say things like, you know what, that doesn't make any sense to me, right? We've heard it. Doesn't make sense. It has to make sense to them. How about that right brain? How does it operate? How do we communicate with people that are maybe right brain dominant? What's the solution there? Well, even in this question mark, you see it's a little more colorful, it's a little more interesting, and that side of the brain is interested in creativity and innovation and thoughts and feelings and emotions. So it needs to be interesting to really get into that side of the brain and communicate properly. And LinkedIn is such a powerful tool. And if you're not using that from a professional standpoint, it's so important to be able to integrate it into your routine, because people can go on there and read about you and see interesting things, facts, and feel like they can kind of know you before you ever have a discussion. And statistically, 80% of business to business leads are through LinkedIn. So it's that 400-pound gorilla that we need to really do business with to achieve our greatest success. And again, using it as a tool so that we can better communicate, impact those brains that we're talking about. And it's so interesting too, that when we can visually connect with someone, so the traditional phone call where there's just a voice on either end, it's so superior to use video. And statistically, you really boost the number of people that open your emails if it's a video email versus one that is not. So open rates are increased by 85% by using video. That's based on Experian data. So again, you're really appealing to that right brain individual. And then podcasts like this are so excellent for people to get to know you and to establish a brand. And once again, I've talked to several business owners, and they say their number one recruiting tool is their podcast, because people get exposed to them, and then it opens them up for a much deeper discussion. And I had a guy ask me one day, he said, hey, if you were going to get 100 CEOs on the phone, he said, how long would it take you? I said, if I focused on it, a year anyway. It'd take a year to get that many CEOs on the phone, because there's so many layers that you have to go to or through to get to them. But he said, listen, if you invite a CEO to come on your podcast, there's an 87% chance they're going to say yes. Then once you're in the interview, you get their mobile number, you get their email address, they get to know you, you build a relationship with them and their gatekeeper. So it's such an excellent way to do business and get new business. But again, it focuses in on that right brain because it's interesting. So let's start to hit the people success formula here. And these principles are so important to really understand. And this first time through, you're going to be familiar with all these terms. However, as we go through the people success formula and you start to practice these things, then on the other side of that's where mastery is. But that mastery comes kind of like the Chinese bamboo tree. It takes time. So familiarity is great, but mastery is a completely different level. And we want to master these things. So I'm going to define these terms. And you notice how it's bracketed, and it's a scientific formula that we have this bracketed approach. And it's interesting because we've got care to the power of warmth. This R is respect. L is love. A to the power of A is appreciation to the power of authenticity. Then we've got this E here, and E to the power of E is empowerment to the power of encouragement. V for value. M for meaningful work. PM, progress and meaningful work. O to the power of A is ownership to the power of approachability. And then you notice these brackets on the outside. And so if you think about a mathematical equation, that this times everything, this is a multiplier of everything inside these brackets. And so the success formula works exactly that way. And this stands for T to the power of belief. So T is trust to the power of belief. So if this is 0, it'll cancel out everything we're doing inside this formula. So if we get these 9 right and we lose trust, then it's going to cancel all this good stuff we have in here. And it's tried and true. And the thing about principles, a friend said this to me a couple of years ago. He said, Dr. Charlie, principles are too important to be new. So these are not new principles. However, putting them together in a formula that's successful for other human beings and working with human beings is. So that first one we talked about was care. And care is so powerful because it is the #1 indicator, and this is according to Willis Towers Watson research, it is a #1 indicator on whether or not people choose to be engaged at work, because engagement is a choice. And so whether or not that employee believes, he or she believes their boss or supervisor, their coworkers genuinely care about them as a human being. And it's the #1 indicator of employee happiness is working a good job where they feel like people care about them at work. And how much does that cost? We don't have to ever write a check for that. So it's so powerful, so very powerful. So now let's go to the next element, and it's care to the power of warmth. And there's one thing to care about people, and we care about people, we greet them. But there's a big difference between a greeting and a warm greeting. It's 100% different. I've had all my travels and been all over the United States, and I've been out of the country twice and eaten in many restaurants. And there's one thing when someone brings you your food as opposed to serving it to you. It's a completely different experience and outcome. So it's so important that we understand warmth. And when people feel like we care about them, then human nature is for them to start to like us and actually care about us as human beings. And so that's where the conversation comes in. And it's so important that we have a dialogue with our coworkers, with our prospects, with our clients versus a monologue. The back and forth really creates cohesion. And sometimes, we're trying to build these relationships, the walls do go up. And so how do we get around them? What's the key to getting around those walls? And it's a fascinating study, this research from the Mercer Group. They went to 22 countries all over the world, all 4 hemispheres, and they wanted to understand the most important thing to human beings at work. So they asked the questions. And as you can imagine, money was always in the top 10. They put a top 10 list together for all 22 nations. Even though money was always in the top 10, it never finished higher than number 8. But what shocked me was that number one was universal. So UK, India, Ireland, South America, China, Japan, Africa, Australia, United States, Canada. And number one was what people want from the day they're born to the day they go to rest. And it's respect. It's number one. And so if you look at a lot of the conflicts that we've had here in the States or in other places around the world, one of the common denominators to conflict is one group or multiple groups feel like at some level their views are not being respected. And anytime a human being feels like they're not being respected, it creates an issue. So let's look at the next aspect of the success formula, and it's appreciation. It's so fundamental that human beings want to be appreciated. It's so fundamental, however, in cases it's rarely practiced, it seems. And whenever someone feels genuinely appreciated, their motivation is amplified greatly. And I love this quote from Harvey Mackay. He said, anyone too busy to say thank you will get fewer and fewer chances to say it. And it's true. So people do want to help. They do want to do a great job, and they also want to be appreciated for the help and the work that they do. And it's so important to always keep this in mind. So now let's look at the heart. This is the second brain we're talking about here. 40,000 neurons. So even though it's small, it's mighty. Because when compared to the other two brains in the body, the gut brain's 500 million neurons, but the heart brain is 40,000 neurons. Then you've got the cranial brain, 86 billion. So the heart holds sway. And I have data that'll show how powerful this is. So it's interesting when two individuals have a conversation, or maybe what we might even term a heart-to-heart conversation. An interesting thing happens to their heartbeats. Research shows that their heartbeats actually synchronize. And when you have this level of connection with another human being, do you think your message is getting through? Absolutely, it is. And there was a study out of, it was the Lindstrom group, and the research, it's so interesting that I stumbled on this research one night when I was looking for something else, and then they stumbled on this research when they were looking for something else. And so the story goes that they were studying a certain brain injury, specifically to the temporal lobe of the brain, and science shows that portion of the brain has a lot to do with human emotion and feeling emotions. And so they were studying people that had been injured, had that significant injury, suffered a significant injury to that portion of the brain. So they wanted to know that, hey, how do people with this brain injury compare to people without that specific brain injury? So they studied the groups, and they found that people with this specific brain injury, there were only two things that they couldn't do that people without the brain injury could. One thing was they didn't feel much or experience much emotion. And they were like, well, this was expected because that portion of the brain had been severely damaged or destroyed. But the second thing they couldn't experience really opened up a whole new field of research and challenged science as we know it. And here's what they couldn't do. They could not make a decision. Not just any decision, okay? So we're talking about what to eat, what to wear, when to go to bed, when to rise. They couldn't make decision. And so they were like, wow, we had no idea that human emotion was this tied to decision making. So they said, how much is this associated with decision making? And they put the research together and found that 90% of decisions come down to emotion. So if we're not reaching people on an emotional level, the chances of us influencing them is greatly reduced. So that heart brain does hold sway over the other two. And we've all heard people say, my heart just wasn't in it. It's a real thing. So how do we connect with the heart? What's the best way to do it? And it's really boils down to this. We've got to be able to connect with people's why. We got to understand their why. And I don't just mean any why, I mean their primary why, the why that's at their core, the why that everything, all the other whys spring from. And I believe every human being's whys can be boiled down to one. Why you woke up this morning, why you're on this podcast today, why you do the things you do can all be boiled down to one. And I'll give you an opportunity to think about this for yourself and guess. With a riddle, you can think about solving this riddle. Here's the riddle. I am the only why. Who am I? It's love. Everyone's whys, ultimately, if we keep tracing them back, goes down to love. Love of family, love of friends, could be love of country, love of what they do, but it all is going to boil down back into love. And so when we understand the whys of our clients, prospects, our coworkers, our family members even, then puts us in a position to be able to connect with them easily. So the University of North Carolina conducted a study, I believe it was over 15 years of research on the impact that love has on human beings. And the kind of love I'm talking about here is not a romantic love. The definition I'm using here is an unselfish care and concern for the well-being of another human being or other human beings. That's the love I'm talking about. And so this study uncovered that love impacts human beings in 4 ways. Only 4. However, these 4 ways are massive in importance and impact on people's lives in the world. And they found that love impacts everything human beings think, feel, do, and become. So whenever I talk to leaders and I say, hey, how would you like to impact everything that your people think, feel, do, and become? Oh, I'd love to do that. You got to love them. You got to love them. And it's so interesting. I remember talking about love and rolling it out at a conference. And I was speaking in Washington, D.C., actually. A Global Cold Chain Alliance conference was over the weekend. And I was found this research a few years back. So I was so excited to roll this new research out at a conference. And there's probably about 100 leaders in the room. And I remember asking the question, do you love your people? And you talk about sucking the oxygen out of a room. I mean, gone. And I was looking around the room for a comment. No comments were available. So I said, hey, this isn't a rhetorical question. I would like an answer. And I'm looking around the room and more people are looking down at their shoes. They're looking down at the floor. No one wants to make eye contact with me. And so I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to spur a little activity here. So I said, hey, I've been standing up here now for a couple of minutes waiting on a response. I haven't received one. However, I see a lot of people around the room looking down at the ground. So I've got to ask the question, did someone lose a set of car keys? Because if you did, hey, I want to help you find them because I know you can't, leave without your car. You know, people did not think that joke was funny. They did not take that joke well at all. So finally, someone in the back of the room said, hey, this is ridiculous. I said, it's ridiculous? Yeah, it's ridiculous. Of course, there's always someone in the back row. I said, well, why is it ridiculous? He said, of course we love our people. I said, of course you do? He said, yeah. I was like, okay, I have one more question. Do they know it? He got quiet. And so they don't know it if we don't show it. So now we move to the gut brain. 500 million neurons make up the gut brain. And what is its sole purpose? You know, it really looks for consistency. And of course, this is, of all the three brains, I think we know the least about this one. So this emerging research. However, what we do know is it looks for consistency in what we're doing. And if it senses in any way that the individual that's speaking with us is not being truthful, then there's no trust there. And we get that gut feeling, don't we? And so what the gut brain does is when you meet a new person, it compares that person to every human being that you've ever met in your life. And then it gives you a feeling. It's that serious. So we've got to be cognizant of that when we're dealing with individuals, that we're transparent and consistent in what we're doing and saying. And so there can be no canned answer. Can't have a canned answer because that gut brain detects the real thing from a fake in record time. How fast does that occur? 0.033 milliseconds, just like that. People know right away. And this is all happening subconsciously. So they're not actively thinking about this, but their three brains, as we speak with them, are communicating with them. Three brains, one mind. And so when people make their mind up, their three brains are in alignment. When they can't make up their mind, their three brains are not in alignment. So it's real critical to understand that. So let's hit the next piece of the formula. We talk about leadership. And I remember reading Norman Schwarzkopf's book years ago. And so he was a famous general here in the US. And he's got a book that's really good. And he talked about leadership. And he said his definition of leadership is a potent combination of character and strategy. He said, but if you must be without one, be without the strategy. And it's so huge that trust is massive. And the number one thing that people want from leaders is trust. It's number one. And anytime we lose trust, as I mentioned, then the formula is really shattered. And all of our good work that we've put in, all of the work that we've done to build a relationship gets shattered along the way. And transparency is the currency of trust. And it builds good feelings. There's good emotion when there's transparency. Transparency makes sense. And it lines up with that gut brain perfectly. So we've got to be as transparent as we possibly can be when we're communicating with our people, with teams. And we're talking about engaged employees, 96% trust their leaders. And so achieving trust is really huge in all of this. And so as I mentioned earlier, you know, it's trust to the power of belief out here. Trust to the power of belief. And so trust over time equals belief. So if someone trusts us, the more time that passes without us breaking that trust while we're maintaining that trust, the more time that passes, the stronger and larger their belief in us is going to become. Just makes sense. And so when we practice these things, when we line up the cranial brain the heart brain, the gut brain, we get connection with other human beings. And this is the foundation of the pyramid of success, people success pyramid. Because otherwise, we're like this nuclear reactor. These nuclear reactors can power cities, but in order for them to power cities, they have to be plugged into the grid. They have to be connected. Otherwise, if they're not connected, they're just this mass of potential energy. And so we are not unlike this as human beings. We've got all this knowledge, potential energy, all this power. But if we're not connected to other human beings, we don't find the connection, then we maintain that potential energy, and we don't get an opportunity for people to see us flourish and to reach our full potential as human beings. And this is personally and professionally. So connection is the foundation of all of it. And you see the positive over here, but it can be negative as well. So we're going to stay on the positive side of this pyramid, but we have to understand too, that if we trend negatively, then the results that we achieve are going to trend the same way. So when we connect with other human beings, truly connect, then we have trust. Trust is huge because trust drives thoughts. Every psychologist in the world, if you put this pyramid in front of them, they'll verify that, yes, indeed, this is accurate. So connection drives trust, trust drives thoughts, thoughts drive beliefs. So massive. So when people trust us, we're connected with them, they trust us and they believe in us, then they will give us the opportunity to add value to them. So now back to the pyramid. Beliefs become behaviors. Trust, thoughts, beliefs become behaviors. Behaviors become habits, and habits become results. And that's a success pyramid. And you can apply this to any business situation. You can apply this to any personal situation. This is the pyramid of success. And whatever your results are that you're trying to achieve up here, it could be more sales, it could be more productivity, it could be more deeper and fulfilling relationships. This is the path to achieve that success. So any questions to this point?
Nothing coming through yet. Not had any in the chat. If somebody's
Awesome.
got one now and they've thought of one, feel free to unmute. You're welcome to unmute and ask your question. I think you're good for now. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So let's finish connecting the dots and completing this formula. So taking ownership is so important, and that we never get in the playing the blame game. We have to take ownership. There's a book out there called Extreme Ownership, and it's written by a couple of U.S. Navy SEALs. And they talk about how in their training, extreme ownership is necessary so that they're on a mission and they get bad intelligence. They can't say, hey, we got bad intelligence, therefore we didn't complete the mission, because these missions are dangerous. So they know that, hey, their response is, we should have adjusted. We got bad intelligence, we should have adjusted. So as leaders, whether it's professionally or at home, we've got to take ownership for our outcomes. And that ownership is to the power of approachability. And there's a Chinese saying that a man without a smiling face should not own a shop. And so we've got to be approachable to people, whether it's a teammate, coworker, or within our home. If we're not approachable, then we're really cutting down on our opportunities to connect with other human beings, because frankly, I don't want to ask this guy a question and no one else does. So we've got to be aware of being approachable. So that's the approachability to the power, ownership to the power of approachability. So this next piece has to do with empowerment. And we have to empower people for them to do their best work. And if we have children at home, we need to empower them, right? So that they can grow to full maturity. And so, what does that look like? Well, its empowerment is important, but we also have to encourage people to use that power. So, empowerment to the power of encouragement is huge. There's a clinical psychologist I know, I'm friends with, his name is Dr. Roger Hall. And I remember he was speaking one time at a conference and he talked about this. And he was talking to his daughter one day. He's got a daughter that's 10 years old at the time. And he says, "Hey, honey, what if mom and dad aren't home, you're home alone, and there's a fire in the house, what would you do?" And she said, I would run out the front door. He said, "Okay." He said, "What if you were in your bedroom and there's a fire in the house and there was a fire on the stairs and you couldn't get down the stairs, what would you do?" She said, "Well, I'd climb over the railing and I'd jump down on the couch. I do it all the time anyway. And then I'd run out, run out the front door." He says, "Okay." He says, "What if you open your door and the fire was right outside your door and you couldn't get out of your door? Then what would you do?" She said, "I guess I'd burn up." He said, "Well, you could go out of your window and there's an awning down there that's about the same distance as the couch, and you could dive down onto that and then run out the backyard." And she says, "Well, I don't want to break the window or the screen because I don't want to get in trouble." So he's like, "Honey, I'm empowering you that if you need to break the window or the screen to get out to save your life, you can do so." And I remember talking to a fireman, was in an audience one day when I told this story, and he teared up. And afterward, he said, "We find children hiding in the closet. It's where we find them." And that empowerment that, hey, you can break a window and get out of here. And so it's so important that we explain to people exactly what that means and what they can do to achieve that. So the next piece of the formula is value. And this one is really huge to me because I looked for a while, I had diversity in here, that we need to understand diversity and really all the aspects to that. But the more I researched, it became clear to me that we need to value other human beings for who they are and what they bring to the table. So now when I value another human being, I'm valuing everything about them: their age, their race, their gender, sexual orientation, thought processes, experience or lack thereof. Because sometimes we can have someone that's brand new, has no experience in the space, and they're going to walk in and point out something that's been a blind spot for everyone because we're so close to it. And they come in with fresh eyes and say, "Why do we do it this way? Wouldn't it make more sense to do that?" And so valuing other human beings at every level is tantamount to connection. And when we value others, they know it and they feel it. So the next piece of the formula, and this has to do with meaningful work. And there was a CEO of an organization, and when we hit the crisis in 2008, the financial industry, he knew that, I believe the name of the company was DTS. He knew that they couldn't survive with the same culture and the way they were doing business. He said, "We're not going to make it out of this downturn, right? And this recession." So he had a friend that worked for this USAA, which is an insurance company that takes care of veterans, military veterans. And so he traveled to their corporate offices and walked around and took a tour and talked to people. And he understood that everyone in that organization, their work was meaningful for them. They had a mission. They knew exactly that they're taking care of veterans and their families and how important that was. So he took that concept back to his organization to massive results. Yeah, DTE Energy. And so over the next 9 years, their stock price tripled in value. And the only change he made was making sure that people knew how meaningful their their work is and was, not only to themselves, but how they're impacting their communities. So as leaders, we've got to make sure that our people know how valuable their work is, and we need to give it meaning. I remember one time I was in Boston here in the US, and I toured this candy facility, and they manufacture candy and all kinds all over the country. And so we were talking, and the workers were like, well, this really isn't important work, what we do. And I was like, oh, yes, it is. It depends on who you ask, right? So I said, okay, let's look at it this way. If we ask every child in the United States that we're having budget issues, and there's three things we're going to put in front of you, and one of them has to go: schools, the police department, or the candy stores. So I can guarantee you, every kid, the candy stores are going last, right? And they all laugh, but it's true. There's a lot of value in what they do. And I know some of my great childhood memories are around candy and getting it and consuming it. So we really got to make sure that people gather the meaning in their work. So we've hit all these principles, but we only have one left: PM. And it's making progress in meaningful work. People need to be able to know and see that they're making progress in meaningful work. And Gallup conducted this study, and found that at 64,000 workday events that they tracked, by far the biggest motivator for employees was making progress in meaningful work. People want to see that the progress they're making is a primary motivator. However, they also pointed out that about 80 to 85% of leaders didn't recognize how important seeing progress in meaningful work is. And so we've got to be cognizant of that knowing that people are looking to see where they're at, how they're doing, and what they can do to improve upon their outcomes. So all these principles we've talked about today are so important. And as I mentioned at the outset, familiarity and mastery are two different ends of the spectrum. And it brings me to this great Gino Auriemma quote. And he said this. He said he's the women's basketball coach at UConn, Lady Huskies. They've really the most accomplished women's college basketball program here in the country. And they were asking him about what differentiates his team from others. And he said this. He said, most teams practice until they get it right. He said, we practice until we can't get it wrong. And I think that's just such a great lesson for everyone, that familiarity and mastery, the only way to get to mastery is to work towards it. And once you have mastery, you're going to be successful over and over and over again. And it's really like having lightning in a bottle. And anyone that knows me knows that I'm a big superhero fan. Love superhero movies. And so anytime one comes to the theater, especially after we get through this pandemic, I'm the first one there. The opening weekend, I like to go to these movies. And I remember the first one I went to when I was growing up was Superman. And Christopher Reeve played Superman. And I remember he was Clark Kent, of course. And I remember watching the movie and thinking to myself, why can't anybody figure out that Clark Kent's Superman? Look at him. That's the guy. Take the glasses off of him. He looks just like Superman. And it's something that I tease leaders about all over. I say this, that leaders every day walk past Clark Kent looking for Superman. And Superman is hiding in plain sight. And there are a lot of super women out there as well. And we all know that Superman goes into a phone booth and boom, comes out and does all these amazing things. And so when we talk about unlocking the full potential of our coworkers, of our team, of our people, it's all about applying these principles that make up the people success formula and that success pyramid. And it just leads to massive results. I can promise you, massive results. And so as leaders, it's all about making a difference. And regardless of our vocation and our job title, to a greater or lesser extent, we're all leaders. So I always love to end these presentations with a true story, because sometimes people will say, well, that's great, but you don't understand, how tough it is here, or you don't understand what I'm dealing with. And the reality is anyone that's achieved great things have had to overcome adversity. And so I always like to tell true stories about leaders that have done just that. They've overcome adversity in their life to achieve something amazing. And that first quote I shared from JFK was that anyone can make a difference and everyone should try is so true. And so I want to close with this story about Maggie Dixon. And she's one of these leaders that overcame. And so most people haven't heard of Maggie Dixon, and it's an amazing story. She was the head women's basketball coach at Army at West Point during the 2005-2006 basketball season. Now, when she took that job, she had some adversity to overcome. First, they hired her only 11 days before the start of that basketball season. Now, she was also young. She was under 30 years old. She never had a head coaching job. Army at West Point's a military institution. It's male dominated, founded in 1802. The first graduating class of female cadets didn't walk across the stage till 1980. To this day, less than 5% of the cadets on that campus are female. Army is a Division I school. However, most of the kids in this country, it's not mandated. Military service is not mandatory. So people have to voluntarily go. And most of the great athletes in the country opt not to go to military institutions because there's a 4-year commitment afterward. I remember I was a pretty good high school American football player, and I had a full scholarship to the Air Force Academy. And I was excited about it, actually, because the level of education. And then he said, well, hey, after you graduate, there's a 4-year commitment. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, you graduate 4 years and then you'll serve for 4. And so I did the math. At the time, I was 17 years old. And I said, 8 years, 25, I'll be an old man when I get out. Because, of course, when you're 17, 25 years old seems ancient. So I opted out of that. But here's the thing. These military academies, they still have to play the big schools. So she had to go see Gino Auriemma at UConn. She had to go see Pat Summitt at Tennessee. They had no real fan base, and she had no military last name. She had no family history in the military. Yet and still, she takes the job and she walks on this male-dominated campus. And she's working with these young women. And as you can imagine, at the outset, they weren't successful at all. Matter of fact, they lost every game at the beginning of the season. But the great thing about college basketball in the United States is that it doesn't matter what your regular season record is. At the end of the season, there's a basketball tournament. There's a conference tournament. And if you can win your conference tournament, then you get to go to the big 64 team field at the NCAA tournament. So she was working and working with these kids and approaching the male cadets on campus saying, hey, you haven't been supporting us. You need to come. And so they started showing up, and sure enough, they find themselves in the Patriot League championship game against Holy Cross. And it's a really close game, back and forth, back and forth. And with only 5 seconds left, Army held a 1-point lead. But Holy Cross had the basketball. They go down the court and put up a last-second shot. And the shot fell short. And Army won the game 69-68, and thus a berth into the NCAA tournament. But as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a true story. And what did Ernest Hemingway say about all true stories? He said that all true stories end in death. Shortly after this big win against a Holy Cross, Maggie Dixon passed away suddenly from a previously undiagnosed heart condition. As a matter of fact, she's the reason why there's an AED in every gymnasium in this country. So at the 5-year anniversary of her passing, there was a really great article on ESPN written about her. And you can still Google that article and find it. But what's missing from that article is all the comments that the cadets wrote in. And so I'm glad I had the presence of mind to write a few of those comments down. I want to share them with you today. As a West Point graduate who attended the Patriot League title game in 2006, I can safely say that it was the most exhilarating sporting event I've ever attended. That team was the first and only Army men's or women's basketball team to make it to the NCAA tournament. The one aspect that is missed in this story is Maggie Dixon's effect on the entire corps of cadets. In 4 short months, she was as much a part of West Point as the statues of Patton and Eisenhower. The fact that she is buried alongside the Corps Fallen attests to that. She not only inspired the women on her team, she inspired the entire West Point family. God bless her memory. Then finally, I remember rushing the court during that win against Holy Cross. I was in the bleachers screaming my head off. When they missed at the buzzer, the building just exploded. That is the absolute best sporting memory of my life. Coach Dixon was absolutely magical. Her presence, I've never seen anything like it. She was truly inspirational to all of us cadets. When she passed, the whole school was in shock. We had a TAPS vigil and it felt like the whole brigade was out there on the plain, observing a moment of silence for her. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was raining and cold, and everyone felt just awful. The sense of loss. And for a woman most of us had never really met, it was unreal. That group inspired us all during that season, and we'll never forget it. Rest in peace, Coach. Be thou at peace. So it's a new day. And you think about the opportunity that each and every one of us has to impact our brand, our business, our coworkers, our team, our families. What a great opportunity we have. And think about what she was able to accomplish in 4 short months, but we have the rest of our life to accomplish even greater things. And we all heard the saying that the sky is the limit, but it is a bit of a cliche because everyone knows that there are footprints on the moon. There is nothing outside the range of accomplishments that human beings, when they work together, can accomplish. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you today, and I will open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Charlie. That was awesome. Very inspiring. We do have questions. Let me just sift through the chat to go further back to some of the earlier ones. It's been some good chat from some of our attendees. So, okay. This one here gets from Jan. I think this might be referring to the pyramid you showed later. So this sounds like a magic success formula. I do agree, trust, transparency, etc. are core values. Would this formula work no matter your background, country, gender, race, etc.? That's your question.
Say that. Could you repeat it?
Yeah, sure. This sounds like a magic success formula. I do agree, trust, transparency, etc. are core values. Would this formula work no matter your background, i.e. country, gender, race, etc.?
Yes, I mean, it's you know, it doesn't, that's the great thing about this. When I get asked to come and work with groups, say they're having a multi-generational workforce issues. Hey, we've got people that are on the team that are 20 years old. We got people on the team that are 75 years old, or we have gender equity issues. When we apply the principles of the formula, it transcends all of that noise. It transcends all of that and gets to the core of human beings, right? And we're all in alignment, knowing that we're all in agreement and working toward the same goal. And when we align the 3 brains, so we have the one mind, then it's pretty much people will run through the wall with us for us. And again, if you look at history and leaders, there have been leaders who have been intentional about a lot of these things for great purposes, and then also for purposes that aren't great. And so what I'm talking about is applying these things in the right way and for the right reasons. And we make the world a better place by doing so.
Great, Fab. Thank you. I missed one that came slightly before that from Nick. So Nick's asking, transparency is the currency of trust. If you look at the world of global finance, the big players continue to destroy trust. What is their future given the rise of fintechs based on your pyramid? Good question.
Here's the thing about this, and it's scary when you think about it. But like my friend said, principles are too important to be new. And so any industry, any organization, any company that violates principles for long enough, it's going to crash. I remember this former president that we thankfully voted out of the office here in the United States, was talking to a friend, and she's like, but look what he did for the stock market. I was like, that's fool's gold. It's going to crash. We know, okay, that it's not built on good business principles. And so, yeah, the money's up and the points are up, but he manipulated it falsely. It's coming back down. It's just a matter of time. And it's just, how far is it going to crash? What's that going to do to the global economy? But the fact of the matter is, we can't do business that way. Well, but he lowered taxes. Okay, we've got this national debt. We can't pay it back by lowering taxes. It's not sustainable. Somebody's going to someday show up and say, hey, the bill's due, right? So that's the thing about principles, is they're sustainable, and ignoring them is not.
Okay, thanks for that. Another
Sorry
one.
to get on my
Nick.
soapbox there.
Yeah. Another one from Nick. You care and love your people, you support, but you still have someone who doesn't want to get on the journey with you. What can you do to try to get them along with you? Or is this a lost cause to keep trying? And is it better they are gone?
So great question. And so what I always tell leaders is, when we know we're doing it the right way, we're being intentional about applying these principles, and still someone doesn't get on board. Now it's time to sit them down, okay, and say, listen, here's what we've done. It's documented, all the things. We've put you in a position to be successful. We've gotten the tools. We're giving you the leadership, the support, everything you need, and yet still you're not wanting to be on the team. So tonight, I want you to go home and have a conversation with your significant other and decide whether you want to be on this team. And then tomorrow, come back and let us know, because what's happening now is you've self-selected yourself off this team. And we're going to have to make that decision for the betterment of the team. So let us know. But if you do decide to go on board, here's what we're looking for. But if not, best of luck to you. Because this is the number one mistake that I see leaders make, failing to address those issues. What it does for the rest of the team that's high performing, it brings them back to the field, because they're like, well, what difference does it make? This guy's not holding his weight and he's still keeping his job. So it actually hurts morale. And statistically, about 87% of people that are working with an underperformer would like to work for another department or another company. So it's big that it gets addressed, and the swifter, the better.
Nice. Oh, wow. Another one from Nick. So Nick's a friend, but I'm going to have a conversation with him about monopolizing the chat with these questions. Right, this is a nice one. It'd be good to hear your thoughts on this. So Nick's asking, who's your go-to hero of the leadership world? One from history and one alive today. And what lesson did you take from each of them?
Wow, that's an awesome question. So I'd say from history, I would say Pat Summitt. And she was the basketball coach for Tennessee women Lady Vols. And I really had it on my bucket list to meet her. And she came down with dementia a few years back. And I didn't realize that dementia was terminal. I thought you lost your memory, but you but no, it's terminal. And so she lost that fight. I really wanted to meet her, and even though it would have been very intimidating, but when she retired from basketball, she had the record for most wins for a college coach. But I still say that she's the greatest college coach that's ever lived in any sport. And there's one reason. Besides all of the winning she did, she's the only college coach that had 100% graduation rate. Every kid that played for her graduated. And they wrote a book about her, and there's a quote that I remember, and she said, when people ask me about the numbers, she said, I don't see the numbers, I see their faces. Okay, so that embodies a leadership that really loves and cares about her people. But she was a tough cookie. I mean, she got after those kids, but she made them better. So current leader, you know, we've got a bit of a vacuum here in the States. I've got to say, we've got a bit of a vacuum here in the States. And so it's really been disappointing for me on so many levels that we've got a bit of a vacuum. And so current is tough. I would say from a business standpoint, someone that I followed for a long time and has built a wonderful business, and the Valuetainment channel, Patrick Bet-David, I put him against anyone, you know, as far as the leadership and the principles, and he laid it all out there in video. So if you don't follow him, Valuetainment, there's so much good value in the videos he put out there. And when I was watching him, and I remember following him when he had less than 10,000 followers, now he's got 2 million or whatever it is. But I remember there were things that he said, and I was like, I don't agree with that. Oh, I don't think that's true. But as an entrepreneur, 4 years later, everything he said has come to pass. So I have a lot of value and respect for him.
Right. Well, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah,
I just wonder why you didn't go out with the US.
Yeah, Patrick Bet-David. So Patrick, then BET-David, and his family immigrated here from Iran, I believe. Yes.
Great, fantastic. Thank you. I don't have any more. We've got a few minutes. I've got one for you, just quickly. I was looking through when you were going through the formula and then the pyramid. So what do you do when you go into organizations and present this and explain the value of it? You come up against like a lot of skepticism, like they're just really violently opposed. They just don't believe what you're saying. Well, how do you try to convince them? How do you overcome that skepticism?
You know, it's amazing because I love the fact that if you look at the formula, and it's a lot when I present in keynote formats, that I'm understanding the three brains. So I'm intentionally coming in to data, then I have a story, then there's a feel good, touchy, then there's an emotional piece, and I swim through those. And so when I get objections, I refer to the data. The data is indisputable. Then if you want to look at results, I can talk about all the different organizations that I've helped and the money they've saved or productivity raised, all of that. And, you know, the only one that of all the formula, the only one that I've ever received pushback on piece was the love piece. And so I always make sure I define it's not romantic love and that, but if I get in front of people, it's so airtight that it's indisputable. And when I actually have a full engagement with an organization, at the end of the training, I give them an opportunity to shoot holes in the formula. And of course, there's a lot of silence. And they just can't do it because, and I remember this one time, it was a construction company and they were having safety issues. And the owner said he was an accountant by nature, by background, and he started this construction company. It was big, but they were having a lot of injury issues. And so I knew he was an accountant, so I came heavy with numbers. And I remember the salesperson that brought me in, I remember saying to him, he's going to have to push his chips in the table because we have the whole leadership team around the table, and I'm going to make an indisputable argument. He says he cares about the team, but we're going to find out. And when I presented all the evidence. Everyone around the table was in agreement. He couldn't dispute it, but they didn't move forward. So everyone knows that you didn't want to spend the money. And when it comes to safety, you can spend the money to prevent the injuries, or you can spend the money paying for the injuries. But guess what? You're spending the money. So you'll spend less by prevention.
Thanks for that. That's good to hear. I've got one last one coming quickly, so I'm gonna allow it because I think it's quite an interesting one, and then I'll wrap up. So, do you think passion would have a place in your formula?
So it's really great. That's a great question. And so I think that it's hard to care about people with warmth, love them, appreciate them authentically without passion. It'd be really hard, but it's a great point. But I'm always looking for any way that I can improve that formula. Like, how can I improve it? And you know, when people talk, well, what about accountability? Then I'll show where accountability shows up in ownership, right? And you're owning things, that's accountability. And so, but that's a great question. But yeah, I think that in order to do it authentically, and you have to be passionate about it, or it won't work.
Nice answer. Nice answer. Brilliant. Okay, great, fantastic. I'm gonna call it there on the questions. You've done an admirable job of answering the questions. Great insight. Just to say thank you for joining us. Loved hosting you. Tremendous session. I think this one will prove very popular on our video library, and when we get it out there. And yeah, thanks for your time. So yeah, really appreciate it. So thanks for joining us. Round of applause for me. If you want to join me, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you.
Getting a few applause there. No, great, brilliant. Really enjoyed it, and looking forward to learning a bit more about your work. Just for our audience, thank you for joining. Great participation. Really enjoyed the session. Thanks for coming along. Just by way of the community shout outs, we have a few things in the pipeline for the rest of this month. Not quite finalized, so do look out for those. They're nearly ready to publish. They'll be available for you. So great start to spring with Dr. Charlie's session today. And as you might have seen already, we've got an awesome session lined up for you in April, when we'll be hosting Kim Morgan, the CEO of Barefoot Coaching. So that's due to be an awesome session. So we've already got a lot of people signing up for that pretty fast. So if you want to be at that, do sign up quickly before places run out. And thanks again for joining. Really good. Glad to be back. And look out for other sessions. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you have to be. And we hope we'll see you again soon. Thank you all. Stay safe. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.